Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Today we'll be talking about how we were able to build an ERP in 4 days. Mark Freedman will be leading this discussion, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the Q&A question box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get back to you either during the presentation at the end of the webinar, or someone will follow up with you after as well. But feel free to interact if you have any questions at all. Go ahead and share, because it's more than likely that someone else has that same question. All right, great. Thank you, guys.
Hey there, can you guys, Pettifer, can you hear me? It says my internet connection is a little unstable.
Yep, I believe we can hear you.
Awesome. All right, I'll get started. So my name is Mark Freedman. Let me just introduce myself a little bit. So my background is actually in manufacturing. So you can think of me as, just a manufacturing engineer, sort of, who sort of typical of what our Tulip's customer base is like. So my background for the last 10 years, working with Danaher and Fortive, working at the companies listed here, working on the production floor and leading a lot of continuous improvement activities. At Tulip, I'm the lean practice lead. So I try and bring that voice of the customer into our product and into our team. So for this webinar, what we're going to do is talk about, the nature of what's required in manufacturing from a software and production support perspective. And then we're going to use an example of what we did with Masks On and PPE logistics. And the solution we built for them, which is very similar to an ERP, and it was built really quickly, which is sort of typical of the Tulip type applications we could make. And then we'll talk about what that sort of means for the shop floor. So first of all, an ERP, for those who aren't familiar, it's a enterprise resource planning, and they're great systems: Oracle, SAP, Microsoft Dynamics AX. These are all ones that I'm familiar with. And they're really the financial system of record, and they do all sorts of things in manufacturing. So it's going to hold your inventory levels typically. Maybe people transact on the floor. Allows the planning teams to purchase materials, and it allows customers to express their demands. And it's really just your system of record. But the thing about them is that they're pretty inflexible. So what in my experience, what happens is, it's pretty rare that you'll just use the ERP exactly as it's designed on the shop floor, because the user interfaces don't really match necessarily the practices or the processes you have in production. So you end up doing things with the solutions that you have. So you'll probably have, and this is true for me in my past, is that you're going to have people who are using Excel. So they're going to download from their ERP, and maybe they'll have a connection to it, and you'll have like an Excel wizard or someone who builds macros and has all these forms you're using to sort of support production, or maybe you'll use Access, but then how does it get supported? So this is the world I was living in for a long time, is building. Yes, this will be available as recording for sure. So yeah, I'm just answering your question that we're getting here. So answer that one live. So yeah, so Access or Excel, those are very typically used in production to either be the process or support the processes. And then you'll get into MESs and ERPs. And MESs, you're typically going to have some integrator. These MESs, although they're meant for production more so than Excel is, they need to be integrated, and you need to have professionals do that. And it's usually not going to be your own operations staff. And same with ERPs. These things take years to launch. So that's kind of what we wanted to highlight here, is what Tulip is and how it addresses these, and how we specifically address this problem in an area where an ERP just would not have been able to function. So the requirements in manufacturing, really, I listed a few here, but it's lean, like lean practices, standard work, hourly scorecards, this sort of thing. The environment's changing all the time, because you're going to have changes in demand. Maybe you need to relay out your cell. You'll have continuous improvement activities, which will change your processes necessarily over time. And you're going to have all these underserved opportunities in production where you really don't have a solution, and you need to create one. So what's Tulip? Just to give a little background here, Tulip is a platform. So it's no code. I'm not a programmer. I'm mostly a manufacturer. and I'm able to use it, and manufacturers around the globe are able to use it. Without writing code, they're able to create these solutions. It's also IoT native, so we can connect, if you have digital micrometers or you have barcode scanners or machines, you can just connect to these things really easily without having to know how it all functions. And you build applications with it. And those applications can be shared across your team, and we can share them with you, and it's that sort of thing. So basically the platform breaks down into these three pieces. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because the focus is going to be on the solution we made, but this gives a little bit of context. So there's the app builder. It's all on the cloud, so you go into your browser and you can quickly make applications. It's kind of like PowerPoint in that way. So you have this app builder portion. You can also use these apps on devices. Then you have IoT and system integration. This can connect to your devices and machines and sensors and things of this nature. Then you have an analytics platform, which allows you to create dashboards very quickly and do some analysis on the data you're pulling from your floor. So here's a little animation of what it's actually like to build with it. It's a drag and drop sort of experience, kind of like PowerPoint, but you can add logic, so you can add triggers. So, if I push this button, then do this. And that gives people the ability to really rapidly build applications and change them. So being a lean practitioner, Kaizen is really important to me. And a lot of Kaizen workshops, for example, you're going to make like cardboard moonshine things to try and figure out if you can find a way that works better. But software hasn't really ever been something you can do that with. With Tulip, it suddenly allows you to do those same sorts of rapid iteration with software. And, it opens up so many doors to be able to now consider a cell phone and the application on the cell phone to be part of your, opportunity for improvement. So that's what manufacturing apps are. And what it really does is it lets you take a look at all the shop floor processes that you have, and the solutions you're using, whether they're physical whiteboards or whatever, and, making them into applications. And oftentimes you're improving your communication, you're improving your like you're able to have real-time dashboards that show you if you're solving a problem, you have a defect that's showing up in a line, you can just create an application that brings visibility into that and have it immediately show up on your board. So it's a really powerful tool, particularly if you're into lean, which I am. So let's talk about Masks On and the solution we created for them, because it's a really good example of just how flexible the system is. You can basically do anything you want with it. And this was an interesting use case. So first, what's Masks On? Masks On is a nonprofit organization that was created very rapidly to support the fight against COVID-19. What they were doing was they were retrofitting scuba masks with 3D printed adapters, and then attaching a filter to those adapters because N95s were in short supply. So it was a design collaboration from a lot of people across the country, and in Boston is where they started production. And what we were finding is, so we joined them and joined this community, this online community of people trying to work on this problem. And as we started talking to them, we realized, and these are real images, not the one on the top. That's not an actual footage. That's a dramatization. But the rest of these are actual images of the solution they were using. And you'll see in the left here, this is it's a Google Doc that was shared, and in it had maybe 20 links of different spreadsheets that were changing all the time. And it was a very, very painful process to even wrap your head around, let alone operate. So you have, these are the inventory is listed in one spreadsheet, and then the demands are maybe in another spreadsheet, and they would highlight them with colors, they would copy and paste them and move them around. And this quote is from Bradley, who was their sort of operations manager at the time. And, the very first day that we were with them, and they were in production, they had 200 masks made, and it was exhausting, absolutely exhausting. And in fact, this system failed them at one point pretty dramatically because they lost everything because it was shared to this open community, and someone had messed with the Google Sheet. So this may sound familiar to you if you're using Excel files in your production, because maybe only one person or whatever can support it. This is the sort of thing that happened to Masks On, and that's when we got involved. So what we did was we recognized basically that the problem that they were trying to solve was one with supply chain and logistics. So over here to the right, I'm showing some examples of the different parties. It's a distributed network, so it was somewhat unique because a lot of times a manufacturing operation is in a site or in a single enterprise, but this was, you know, a group of volunteers that were sort of networked across the country. So it was an interesting scenario. You have your frontline healthcare providers and healthcare workers who are expressing demands. Then you have national carriers like UPS, USPS. Then you have these volunteer couriers, so people who just wanted to, you know, offer their time and their vehicle to pick up and deliver locally. Then you have this supplier organization, so Masks On, and the people who try to support that. Then there are donations and makers. So we had 3D printers trying to contribute and send in their printing components. And then you have manufacturing centers, which is, you know, actually where they're trying to assemble these masks and perform these value-added operations. So this distributed network is the ecosystem we are working in. And we wanted to take it from these spreadsheets, paper forms, and, you know, Google Sheets, all these sorts of things, Slack channels, text messages, to something that could scale, because we wanted to help them deliver a lot of masks quickly without having to, you know, really burden themselves with administrative waste. So that was what PPE Logistics was a solution to solve that. So we'll talk about what that system is, how it works. But first, let's get into some of the results. We built it basically in 4 days. In truth, the majority of it was built in 1 day. So here's sort of a timeline of it. You'll see that we started on the 27th, we joined, and then the next day we had an example of how this could work, and we processed something through it. Over the next couple of days, they actually expanded their operation and moved to a new location to improve their output and have, you know, a contract manufacturer get on board. A group called Lightspeed. They're actually fantastic. And by the 4th day, really, we were ready to launch. And then on the 5th day, I'm not sure if you count 0 as 1 or whatever, but 4 days later, we had it launched. So every mask was going through exclusively this. They turned off their Google Sheets, and now it's working, and it's fantastic. So it's been a really great experience, and it was very rapid to implementation. Something like integrating an ERP of this sort, you know, this sort of ERP, I'm calling it ERP, but really it's connecting all of these different functions. And you know, there's even like an Uber to this, which is interesting. And that all happened in about 5 days. So here are some like immediate impact, just to get a sense. After that first day of working with Tulip, I asked, you know, how's it going? We like to get feedback. We're working together on it. And some of the feedback was just incredible. I mean, you know, they don't know how they would have handled this without it. It's so much easier, it keeps track of everything. Words can express how much love the system. So it was really rewarding to see that we had an immediate impact. And you can see here just where it's gone across the country. So all these yellow dots here are places that we've delivered to. And the green dots are actually different communities beyond Masks On who are starting to use the system as well. So we have a group in Philadelphia who's really active, and a group in Miami as well. So this is just to show you how that it's real, that it's working every day. And here's a little bit of high-level numbers and summary of where we're at now. So you see here, this is the first day it was created on the 26th or 27th. And then within 5 days, it was in use. And now you see this is this chart here is a representation of people logging into the system. So we have 20 to 40 daily users using it. So we've delivered over, this is a few days old now, so this is probably likely higher at this point, but it's about 4,000 orders delivered, over 40,000 items delivered, 3,500 institutions, and 3,600 customers total with masks or PPE, thanks to the system. And this chart here shows you sort of the expansion. So these green lines and these dots represent other people besides Masks On using it. So how was it built? Let's talk about a little bit of behind the scenes here. This is going to keep this pretty high level, but if you have questions specifically, you want to go into detail, I'd be happy to explain. But basically what you see here is this single cell phone application that can be used in any browser really. And this is what any of those people that we just talked about, so the frontline workers through the manufacturing centers, can log into and sort of establish themselves in the system. And then here's sort of the network of the supply chain. So some of these supply sites actually link to each other, and sometimes they're passed between volunteer couriers, and sometimes they're passed between national carriers. And the whole thing has to be done. We wanted the whole thing to be done in Tulip, so that you're not switching between different systems, because what system is going to support some of the activity that we have. So we really wanted to make sure Tulip would cover all that. So the way that we thought of doing this from the get-go was to consider each one of these elements a work center, and work centers are able to express demands as well as hold inventory and fulfill demands. So you can have a chain of work centers working together, which makes this a pretty extensible solution that you can use in a variety of places, which is why we're starting to call it an ERP, because we're actually having customers place demands. These demand sites are able to see those demands, or these supply sites are able to see the demands, create inventory, allocate reserve inventory to demands, process them, complete through the chain through shipping. So it's the system of record that's very similar to the way an ERP operates. And actually, it was built based on our experience with ERPs. I happen to love ERPs, and they have a lot of really great ideas that we tried to emulate here. So a little bit in the background, I wanted to share some of the tables. So this thing is supported by a Postgres database. Tulip has a database built in that you can just use, Tulip tables. And for a lot of reasons, that works for a lot of solutions. In this case, we built a Postgres database in the background. And so Tulip can also be a front end to your ERP or to a database. And that's what we used in this case. So we're doing a lot of linking of tables here. So we wanted to use that functionality. And the tables are basically, you have work centers, which defines these physical places I talked about. Then they have like geo coordinates, because we've linked to Google, because if we're using couriers to deliver these things, we need to know their latitude and longitude. So we're actually connecting to a lot of outside services like Google geocoding and things of this nature. So work centers is one. Next is inventory, that holds the inventory, the actual physical material. So if you have 100 of this part in this location, this is where you'll store that. It'll also show you the reservation status. Then we have demands. So when someone places a request, this table stores that. Then there's a transport table, which is going to define and control the workflow for those deliveries with couriers, so that changes their status. I've confirmed the delivery, I've picked up the delivery, I'm dropping it off, and then all the transactions of inventory are happening along with it. Then there's the users. So the users are, each individual who joins has a different role to play, and their view into the world, which I'll get into in a second, is defined by this user table. And then finally, the items. So the bill of materials, if you create one unit that's composed of these underlying units, it's going to backflush those materials and adjust inventory. So that's how that functions. So here's an example of the suite of applications that are in use. This isn't all of them, but it's most of them. And the users that would use them. And what happens is one of these users, for example, a supplier site manager, will log in through this entry point, and they'll be exposed to a navigation screen, which gives them the ability to connect and use the suite of applications that applies to their role. That's kind of a heavy sentence there, but basically what we did here is we built, and these were all built as the process grew. So we didn't start with all these applications. We started small. We started with, the demand terminal, lets you see your demands, the order terminal, and the work center one. And then we started adding them. So Tulip allows you to continually build and evolve the system as you use it, which is definitely necessary in this case. So as we started integrating with shipping, we didn't start integrated with GoShippo and UPS, but after the first 4 days or so, we started having that integrate immediately. And then we started allowing courier manager organizations. So we're working with NSRN, who just manages a network of couriers. Maybe they're going to have a different view entirely. So we started creating new applications to support their activities. So these applications grew along with the needs, and sometimes they actually predicted and grew and before the needs actually arose. So we were able to stay ahead of it. So this is sort of how the system works. I'll walk through the workflow generally, just so you can see how it functions. Basically what happens is you have a healthcare provider who's able to place orders through something like an Amazon application. Now, these are all donations, so we're not charging anything or asking for any money here. It's just giving them access. So they'll see this catalog, they'll place requests on these, and then it'll show up into a request terminal, in which case like a CSR or customer service representative of sorts will review those, check their legal documentation, write notes. It's kind of like a CRM. So at this point, it's kind of acting like an ERP or like Salesforce. So here it's acting like Amazon. Here it's acting like a CRM, and then or customer relationship management software. And then they'll release to production. So then at production, you're going to have these site managers who now see the orders that have been approved through the request terminal, and they're going to take a look at their inventory and reserve their inventory against their demands. We also have a number of applications which aren't shown here that are further front line. So the front line is able to just reserve and create materials as well, and it will all feed together. In this case, they're able to reserve, and then their shipping terminal will give them the option of either shipping directly through a FedEx or a UPS, or they can decide to go through a courier application, in which case a courier manager now sees a transport request and can filter off based on those coordinates I mentioned earlier to see which couriers are within a range they've agreed to service. And it allows them to assign that order to them. And then that person can confirm on their phone and pick it up, and it gives them the information they need to make the delivery. An example of how we expanded this was at a certain point, the group no longer wanted the courier manager to assign them. They wanted the couriers to sort of just look at a list of available options and then volunteer, proactively to make the delivery. So we added another button on here, just like the way you saw it, really easy to drag and drop. And now that shows them all of the unassigned orders, and they can do it that way as well. So really flexible solution. And this one's sort of acting like an Uber of sorts. So you've got like an Amazon-y thing, you've got a Salesforce type thing, then you've got a more traditional ERP with inventory allocating. There's some MES elements here where you have like the actual screen at the work center, and then you have an Uber-like application. So all this stuff was built in very rapid time frame. And yeah, I haven't seen any questions come in, but please feel free to ask any questions if you want to go into more detail about how some of that stuff works. I can even show you, the application working if you're interested. And then, how did you assign, manage roles, and access to associated apps for each role? So the way we did this was we went a few different ways with this. So Tulip traditionally operates where you have a central administrator who grants access to applications. That's all built into Tulip. So in your manufacturing facility, for example, you would just use that canned solution. In this case, we wanted to make it so that, because it was totally distributed, I actually don't know almost any of the people who are using it. So they go in, they create a password, and so there's a table, the users table I mentioned earlier, which basically stores and encrypts your password. And then the user is able to assign themselves to a role within an organization, and that organization gives the approval of that person to operate within it with a password. So that's how we manage access. When the user navigates between the applications, there's trigger logic in there which checks the user's role and gives them view into only what's allowed. So we're using basically the standard Tulip functionality to control that. I hope that answered your question, Mike. So how many people worked on the application? The majority of the application was just built by me over the 4 days. But that was just doing the building of it. I'd say people who worked on it, I worked very closely with Mass On, trying to understand exactly what was going on there, and we worked together in a lot of cases. So I'd say primarily one, but that's now changed over time. So we actually have a lot of volunteer engineers because Tulip is quite easy to understand. It doesn't take, there's not much of a learning curve, especially if you have a background in computer science. So we actually have volunteers now who are making changes to it every day and adjusting it. So now there's about 5 people. It was all volunteers. So, everyone has day jobs outside of this, and we're just doing this to sort of support the cause here. So it's all volunteer. As far as the ideas of what we would build and what the use case was, Masson played a really critical role there. So there was probably 3 people plus me during those first 4 days that really played a significant role. Hope that answered your question, Guillermo. How are suppliers competing for available demand? I assume the demand is aggregated and shared across suppliers. Okay, so this is interesting. Right now, what we're doing is we're not letting other suppliers. We're keeping them separated currently, so they're not competing at all with each other. It's kind of like they're all operating within the same instance, but they're separated, so they don't compete in that way. However, there are tools and solutions within the system that enable you to sort of claim a demand. So let's say you don't want to hold stock. You actually are a 3D printer. You want to print to order. When someone places a demand within your supplier organization, a supplier organization like Masson, for example, might have 5 supplier sites, those green dots I showed you earlier. And those supplier sites might make the same products, especially if you're a distributed network of 3D printers. So what we did there is we allowed basically all the demands to be seen by the supplier organization that it was ordered upon. And then the supplier organization gets to choose which site's going to fulfill that demand. And the supplier site itself can actually claim the demand and say they're going to fulfill it. So they can basically place a flag in and say, we're going to take this order and build it. And then we'll reserve once we have inventory. I hope that answered your question, Graham. They would see the raw demand as soon as the customer service representative released it to production. So after like an authenticity check, for example. So a little bit just to kind of bring it all together here in the end. The solution I showed you just now is just one expression of Tulip. You can use Tulip to make anything that you want. We've made a Dungeons and Dragons game out of it once. So you can really do anything you want with it. So it's up to your imagination. And every shop floor faces unique challenges that may require some sort of customized solution. So it's really a question of what problem are you trying to solve? And then you can use Tulip most likely to solve that or help facilitate the process moving forward. So that's what we're showing here is some examples of applications that people are using to monitor machines or to facilitate training, or maybe their point of use work instructions or some sort of inspections. We thought we'd show you a few examples of other ways people have used Tulip, because the whole thing is configurable and customizable. But again, it's a strong platform that allows you to scale and so forth. So this is our partner DMG Mori. Actually, all of the DMG Mori machines coming out in the future are going to have Tulip built in automatically. So if you're familiar with that wonderful machine, you'll be able to use Tulip right on it, which is neat. But here's their spindle line that uses Tulip. You can see they have inspection sheets here and fully built by them, and it's in every station in their facility. So it gives them visibility, allows them to keep consistent inspection logs and so forth. This is another customer of ours, Jabil. They are using it in place of, I'm sure you guys are familiar with an hourly scorecard or something of this sort, which is typically every hour an associate will walk up to a piece of paper or a whiteboard and write in the number of units they've built during that hour. This renders that obsolete because, we're just naturally gathering data direct from the line in real time. And not just that, but also shortages or defects and things of this nature. So here you can see Jabil using it for production control and for work instructions. And then another example here is a Dentsply. So they have, I think it's hundreds of thousands of permutations of this, of the kit they're building here, because it's customizable. Every tooth is different and so forth. So there's so many different options. And typically it would take, only person with the most tribal knowledge would be able to actually do this and read the bill of material and understand what sort of thing needs to be packed here. In this case, we very quickly integrated with a pick-to-light system, a light kit, and now basically anybody can use it. Training is very simple. And in fact, in my personal experience at Fortive, this was the first application similar to this that I built with Tulip, was pick-to-light, which took all that tribal knowledge and made it so you just scan the order and then all the lights show up and you just pick. So here's some examples of things people are doing. But there are so many applications people are building, it's hard to keep track of what they do. And I don't even know what a lot of them do, but you can make them do basically whatever you'd like. So that's basically the overview of this application and the solution we created for Masks On and with Masks On. Thank you for your questions. I'd like to open it up. Okay, nice. Some more questions. So Richard has one here. So does Tulip, for work instructions, does Tulip handle localization of language or work with visual instructions? So we believe in rich media. So maybe it's a video or pictures, interactive, this sort of thing. So definitely we are on the side of visual work instructions. As far as localization of languages, the Tulip application itself, like the navigation within it, changes languages based on the language you choose. But the words you write in your application are going to be of the language that you choose. Now, if you have an enterprise or that operates in multiple areas with different local languages, or you'd like to change dynamically which language is displayed, you could definitely make an application that dynamically loads work instructions based on a user profile. So maybe if you have you have multiple languages spoken within your organization, you can make it so that user can set their profile when they scan, the correct language comes up. So really up to your imagination on that one, but I like to have the operator interacting with, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I like to have the operator interacting as little as possible with the screen. I want them working on the value added operation. So, at a glance work instructions, maybe changing your step when you do activities like use a torque tool or press a foot pedal or something like this. That would be preferred to me. Can this platform be used as an MES? Definitely. Manufacturing execution system. Those, I mean, they're great, but in my experience, you need to have an integrator do it. Because they're proprietary software. It's usually not open for you to change, and if you're familiar with manufacturing facilities, typically you're going to need some form of customization. Tulip is all about that. So it can definitely be used as an MES. Some people call it no MES, but I mean, it's the tool that I would use. So much so that I left my previous role using Excel and Access and these sorts of things, because you can turn it into whatever you want it to be. And for me, my vantage point has always been, what is it like to be the associate, to be in their shoes? What are the problems that they're having? And how can I give them the information that will help them do their job better? So you can transform Tulip to do that. And as a manufacturing engineer, I mean, it's amazing to be able to get information regarding the problem you're trying to solve. So I can give one example of maybe a previous example of a previous life, what I had actually done, and what I would do now. And you could argue it's an MES, but it's an interface with operations, and that's what I care about most, more so than the naming convention. But basically, we had a situation where we had these defects at the end of our production line, right before and around testing, and people were actually, each individual tester had a clipboard, and they would basically make a Pareto with a pen, and then at the end of the day, people would all gather at the board, and we would transfer their sheets to the board. That is real. That happens every day, I'm sure, across the country, and I would just use Tulip for that. I could change the application on the fly. They would get each person would have like a little tablet. Tablet's like $100. You put them on their station. They click which ones, and automatically my daily management board is updating in real time. So long answer to your question. I kind of went on a tangent there, but definitely could use it as an MES, especially because it connects to machines like natively. I mean, anything that uses an OPC UA server, you can even hook up a sensor if you have an old machine and you just want it just like has some sort of device that moves back and forth. You could just hook up a proximity sensor and suddenly you're measuring OEE. So what were the first steps you took with the customer to understand the process, the pain points, and the possible solutions? This is from Guillermo. So this is interesting. This is a really interesting question. I think that more important than Tulip is just the tool, in my opinion, and it's a great tool, and I love it. Obviously, I work here because of how much I like it, but it doesn't solve the problem for you. So you have to understand the problem. So the first steps I took was I joined this Slack community, and I basically tried to figure out what was happening. So a big thing that I'm a big believer of respecting and understanding the current state. These people are doing good work with whatever tools they have, and it was on me to understand what it is they were doing. So I would find the more active users in the group, ask them what documents they're using, and they would bring me to Slack channels and say, hey, look at this Slack channel. Here's a taste of what we're doing. And because of, I guess, my experience in manufacturing, I recognized the pattern in what they were doing. And the pattern was one of a supply chain and logistics system that had similarities to ERPs. So that's why I mentioned this is like Amazon, and this is like Uber, and this is like an ERP, and this is like Salesforce. Because of my experience, I saw the patterns in what they were doing. And I recognized that they were trying to do all of that on a Google sheet. And, by writing by hand onto masks and things of this nature. So the possible solutions, I didn't know the answer, and I don't actually think we're at the ideal state. I don't expect to ever be at the ideal state. But what we did do was we failed quickly and created a solution that we could change and respond. So the product actually changed from day 1 to day 7. The location that they were building in changed from day 1 to day 7. I mean, all these things were changing dynamically. And that was what made Tulip so effective, I think, is because, you're able to change it rapidly. And getting real-time feedback with the people who work there, the people who are trying to do the good work of delivering these materials, we're able to just become a trusted party within that group who is providing value very quickly. So I'd say some of the more difficult challenges were like becoming welcome potentially into the group, because a lot of people will say, hey, we have this solution, we want you to use it for some reason. For me, what Tulip was able to do was provide value very quickly, because the only thing that mattered was results. And they saw how quickly we were able to change and adapt and meet the needs that they had that were coming up like left and right out of nowhere. So a lot of possible solutions here. We have tried different avenues. We integrated, and that kind of speaks to some of the integrations. So at first we weren't doing a USPS or FedEx integration. And then we took that on because we recognized we were going to start shipping to other states. And happened in a day. So how easy it would be for a first-time Tulip user to come up with a solution? It depends on the user's experience with the problem. So to build the application, we have all sorts of ways to learn how to use Tulip. We have community.tulip.co. We have Tulip University, and you can reach out to us directly with support.tulip. And we always encourage and want to help our customers get value from the tool. So, I think it's good to start with a small problem, a small scope problem, and then work towards it. We also have lots of content. So maybe you want like a simple and-on solution. If you check out our YouTube or our community, you'll see that there's, some people want an and-on solution, but it's tough because you have to install all these lights, and then what system do you use, and then where does the data go, and all these sorts of things. I mean, you can just get a 30-day trial of Tulip for free. I mean, I guess I'm sounding pretty salesy here, but honestly, you can just do it for free. So, and you can just download our Andon solution and change it for whatever your needs are. And basically what you've done is you've given your associates tablets. They can press a button and say they want help, and now you've recorded the fact that happened. And that can be like a really small place. So I would say getting started depends on the problem you're trying to solve. This one happens to be, you know, I wouldn't start with this one, but because it's like, you know, you have to have experience in these sorts of systems. And then, you know, it was a pretty intense thing to build because it kept changing. So I wouldn't start with this, but, you know, now that we built it, you can download it, or you can use things like it, or, you know, oftentimes you're going to have an ERP anyway. So you can just start by connecting to your ERP and maybe pulling, you know, inventory locations or something. So we'd love to talk to you more. It sounds like you may have some ideas here, Guillermo. So if you want to reach out, feel free. We'd love to talk to you. Justin, can you share some of the best cost justifications you've seen to help gain upstream support? What's the most cost-effective way to implement single station and multi-station at once? So one of the things, this is a personal opinion, but what I've seen is people typically like to, for some reason, start with work instructions. And I think that's probably not the best starting point in general, because of how much process engineering goes on, is required to do work instructions well. So, you know, you're basically asking people to rewrite all these documents and before they can even start getting value from Tulip. So, you know, what I would suggest some of these superstructures, I call them, that support production. So maybe it's like the Andon one I mentioned, or maybe it's like a problem solving one. So maybe you want to just capture defects or shortages, and then you want to be able to feed those in quickly. So like feed those into some sort of central source where your team solves that problem. So I guess there's like maybe two ways of thinking about it, right? There's this superstructure that allows you to identify problems more easily and like sustainably so that you can solve them. Or Tulip could actually be the solution to some problem that exists. So I can give you an example of this customer, one of the first customers I worked with actually, where they were working in a lab and they were doing tests. And this person was using paper to do so, but because of the way that they had to do it, this person would spend an extra hour basically with all these samples, laying them out on a table in order and writing down information. And it became clear to us that a computer could just, you know which one went where. So this person literally, the day we put Tulip in place, saved at least an hour for every single batch of tests. So there, and that's just not like that time is immediately gained. So it's a question of what kind of value you're trying to get. You know, in line with like Kaizen and continuous improvement, you know, small improvements over time, like they add up to huge results. I happen to really like the solutions that support production communication in these superstructures. So, you know, I would think you could justify it with some of the metrics that you would get from there. So maybe it's, you know, uptime of a cell. So if you want to track andons, you know, those cells are going down basically anyway, whether they're tracking it or not. So you get a jump off point when you put Tulip in place, and then you build some workflows around problem solving and Paretoing those reasons for being down, for example, and then you would solve them. And assuming that you would solve the problems you've identified, you'd be able to realize some cost justifications. So, but those are some examples of ways to do it. People typically would use things like OEE or yield as cost justifications, but you could also use things like lead time in the example that I shared of the of that lab. Cost-effective way to implement. We typically suggest just the trial, so find a use case that, you're struggling with, call us up. We have great people who are able to talk to you and are familiar with all sorts of common use cases. We also have content we can just give you to try. So, I would say just, use the app on the trial and try it for yourself and see if you get value from it. I would definitely recommend finding someone in your team who is likely the Excel guru or the access guru or whatever, someone who understands production. So what's neat about Tulip is you don't need IT to do stuff. Nothing against IT. I mean, they're amazing, right? Like almost all of Tulip is IT, really. But this is meant for manufacturers. So you want to find someone who knows the reality of the production floor and what their problems are, and you want to make sure that person, and hopefully that person has is able to create a PowerPoint slide, for example, and create maybe some basic functions in Excel and just let them roll. So some people actually have interns who are fresh from college or whatever, who are helping out, and they just give them it as a project. And it's actually amazing how quickly they're able to bring value. So there's a lot of options, but definitely start small. If you're going to try and lay out your entire factory, I think that's probably not the way to start. I definitely believe in slow continuous improvement or fast continuous improvement. So start with a cell, start with a problem that you have, maybe with some sort of shortage you're seeing or some sort of defect, and start from there. So I think that's all the questions that we have so far, but feel free to throw some in here. I really appreciate the questions you guys have been asking, by the way. Thanks so much, you guys. And Guillermo, if you want to reach out, sounds like you have maybe some more questions you'd like to ask or like to talk further. I'd be happy to talk to you. And that goes for anybody, really. Feel free to reach out to us.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you everybody for joining us. I think this is a good place to stop. And again, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to follow up or respond to the email that we're going to send out. Or you can also visit our website, tulip.co, where you can try out our free trial, as Mark was talking about during the Q&A. And have a great rest of your day.